Michael. Thank you, João, for the invitation. I'm Marcos Peigo. I'm CEO and co-founder of Scala and operating partner to Digital Bridge. We run a Latin American sustainable platform for hyperscale data centers. We started this business 3 years ago, just completed 3 years last April. We started with the inception of the company with the acquisition of 2 selected data centers from UOL company in Brazil with 17 megawatts back at the time. It was right before the pandemic, and we were brave enough to move forward with a plan, launching the company in April 2020. Now, make a long story short, we are now a 150 megawatts company with 55 megawatts built and 150 contracted. We were fortunate enough to see the change in the market in Latin America, especially. Our underwriting case were for 50 megawatts at the time. When we saw deals, average deals of 2 to 4 megawatts, and now we are leasing 24 megawatts for 15 years. So, supporting what our colleague previously presented on the last keynote, it's really the trend that we are seeing, and we are focused on hyperscale customers in 2 different types of deployments, what we call hypercore big campuses. Tamboré is one of the biggest campuses in the world for now, 450 megawatts of IT capacity when fully deployed. We are leasing single tenant buildings. It's not anymore, we leapfrog from cages to data halls, from data halls to buildings. Single tenant buildings is what we are doing and where we are focusing. And what we call hyper edge, which is not just edge loads for hyperscales, but enabling tier 2 and tier 3 markets in Latin America. We're doing this in Fortaleza, Rio de Janeiro, Porto Alegre in Brazil, also in Colombia, Mexico, and Chile. And this combination of hypercore and hyper edge is where we are focused, mainly on hyperscale and with sustainability at its core. Coming late to the market could be a curse, but became a blessing for us. We were able to launch new designs that were focused on sustainability, and a lot of first of its kind is related to Scala. We were the first data center company with 100% of renewable source of power since the beginning, the first to achieve carbon neutrality, and the majority of this came as an answer to a challenge of launching the company during the pandemic. We started the company only with 35 employees coming from the carve-out, focused on operations. We are now 727 as of today, because we decided to internalize everything from design to be our own general contractor in a way to give answers to our customers in a fast and very customized way. So we are really proud, talented team, diverse team, coming from several different industries, not only from data center landscape, heavy construction, power sector, like my CFO that is here, Anna. And this is it. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Wow, you covered pretty much everything I would ask.
I can go to panel. I'm waiting for the chicken fire.
Fabio, how would I turn it over to you for just introduction to yourself and your company?
I'm glad to be here today. Thanks for the invitation, first of all. My name is Fabio Fontana. I'm the CEO of ZeroPoint and Chief Growth Officer of Tonomus. Tonomus is the technology arm of NEOM. And NEOM, maybe some of you know, is one of the biggest projects in the northwest part of Saudi Arabia. It was started in 2019, aiming to build a country from scratch, the size of Belgium, 25,400 square kilometers of land, starting from scratch. Our objective is to build a quality country with different quality city. When we talk about quality, it means it's the next generation of smart city. Smart city is real time. It doesn't predict quality city predict. So when you go on prediction, you need to build a quality city. You need to build a quality infrastructure. That means connectivity and data centers. So that's what ZeroPoint is all about. We aim to start with 36 megawatts, going up to 250 megawatts by 2030. NEOM will welcome when we be completed about 9 million people. So image to build a country from scratch. We have a big challenge, and that's what we need to do. That's where we're working with a lot of ecosystem and partner to make sure that we're going to happen. We discussed more during the panel.
Sounds good.
Hi everyone, thank you Michael. My name is Krupal Raval. I'm the Managing Director of xScale, which is a unit within Equinix. It's addressing all the hyperscale needs of our customers. Equinix, I'm sure most people know, but a couple of years ago we decided that we wanted to address the needs of hyperscale customers because we already have so much deployment within our core business with them, but they were asking us for kind of a lot of the compute nodes, as Marcos pointed out. It's grown so much from small deployments, individual halls to full buildings. So we've been doing that We have projects all throughout the world in EMEA, APAC, and Americas, so all our 3 major regions. Total commitments with our investment partners of about $8 billion, and we're growing. So that's hopefully a quick summary of what we're doing.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that. So maybe we start things off with demand. And we're coming off of, I think, globally, really strong leasing year in 2022 for data centers. Krup, maybe sticking with you, how would you describe the overall demand environment as it stands today, and how the evolution has been over the last 12 months on the hyperscale side?
Yeah, great question, Michael. I think that the whole thesis is that demand is still super strong, which is a great thing, but I think that there's a lot more, the cycle times are taking a lot longer. Decision making is harder. Capital is, even with our customers who are the kind of the best customers on the planet, they have tons of capital themselves. They have to be much more intentional as to how much capital they can commit to in terms of even leasing. So I think that the time scales are longer, and frankly, the other thing that I think we're only scratching the surface on right now is AI. And I know it's kind of a little bit of a buzzword right now, but AI is really going to translate to just insane compute requirements. And so what that means, this is an editorial on my part, is that there's going to be a huge amount of the requirements are just going to get even bigger, right? So we used to talk about 3 megawatt build, 3 megawatt halls being kind of a big deal, and then it went to 30, and so it's growing in kind of logarithmic scale, and the next generation could add a 0 to that. So it's really quite exciting, but it also means that our customers have to be, again, intentional with who they partner with, because they the needs are so big that they can't have, they just need to be much more streamlined in their procurement. Again, just an editorial, but I think that summary statement is that demand is strong, it's getting stronger, but cycle times are taking longer just given the macro climate.
All right, sounds good. We'll circle back and talk about AI because I think that's an important theme. But maybe Marcus, I can turn over to you. When we were talking outside, you mentioned kind of growth trajectory for Scala data centers. Over the time that you've been operating, how have the requirements of the hyperscalers in, let's say, Latin America evolved since the time you started the business?
Yeah, changed a lot. First, after hearing the introduction of my colleagues, I changed the plans for Scala. I want to sell my company to Krupal and sell I have a history with the asset, the OLG asset. I sold my IT service company to UOL back in 2012, and I was running UOL since 2012 until 2017. And then we acquired the assets back in 2019. My first hyperscale agreement was signed in 2014. The average density for it was a 2 megawatt deal with a ramp of 5 years there, which was basically nothing. The average density required at the time was 5 kilowatts per rack with peaks of 8. The latest that we just signed is 24 kilowatts per rack, 24 megawatts, 15 years. So it's a dramatic change when you think about the level of power and the density and the cooling solutions that you need to provide. What we are seeing in Latin America now is a combination of several factors driving the demand. You look for constraints in growing capacity in a place like Ashburn, Virginia, for example, that was used to serve Latin American customers for long. Low latency requirements for new applications in Latin America, data sovereignty issues, as well as the expected maturity of the customers in developing applications. That brings the center of gravity of where you are providing capacity close to the customers, as well as currency fluctuation issues. So the customers in Latin America, they don't want to pay USD anymore, they want to pay local currency. They want to be integrated by other applications. So we see what's happening is that the key hyperscalers, they are bringing capacity, core capacity to the campuses. We are seeing this trend in São Paulo, in Cambodia. We are seeing this trend now in Santiago, which are the two key. We have seen this in Querétaro happening. Yet in Querétaro, the deployments, they are more fragmented than we are seeing in places like Santiago and São Paulo. And then we see the natural evolution that you guys are all mastering this for long with access scale, that you see the usual local zones that became full availability zones that became replicated to disaster recovery zones or full regions. So this is what we see. And now we see this evolution even with the capacity inside the country, we see them anticipating the movement for tier 3 markets being enabled by requirements. The cost of telecommunications in countries like Brazil is still pretty significant when you bring the total cost of ownership to customers when they are doing their best on migrating their journey to the cloud, executing their journey to the cloud. So we see this. Hey, hello. Good morning. And we see this trend, and this is what we are trying to answer with the big land bank. Scala today, we have almost 2 million square meters under control in 52 plots of land, of which we are developing 13 buildings in parallel now, 7 in operation. But when you compare the markets in Europe and the markets in Latin America, from an on-ramp perspective, we are only 1/10 of what Latin America should be. When you compare for the density of population, economic activity in these countries, you should have 31 data center markets. We have only 9 in Latin America active today. So there is pretty significant avenue for growth here, and this is what we believe.
All right, well, thank you for that. Fabio, I want to turn over to you. As I was putting the questions together for this panel, one of the things that I was thinking about is, you're building in a market where there's a large existing population and so on. This is data centers for a new city. It's a completely different paradigm and country, yeah, right? So as part of that, I guess my question for you is that, how do you think about the, let's say, long-term demand cycle for the data centers that you're building? And as part of that, how do you think about future-proofing for this new country, essentially, that you're developing?
Yeah. So first of all, demand is going to be a lot. Actually, we already have demand, and we're still building. Why that? Because as I said before, when we build a community city, you need a lot of data. Today, a city like London, any other traditional city, we consume up to 9% of the data available. That's why people talk about dark data. Dark data is 90% of data sitting in the data center, nobody is using that. Why are we using that? Because systems are not connected between each other. So in our case, we are starting to build an operating system that connects everything in the city. And the city is going to have almost everything. We are going to have about 16 sectors. Every sector is going to have the specific thing. So we have the healthcare sector, we have the mobility sector, mobility sector, tourist sector. So all these systems are working together with a consent platform. So things can basically communicate with a consent. That means you can use 90% of the data. So that means that you need a lot of capacity to start. That's the reason why we're starting with 36 megawatts, but we really predict that by 2030 we need to have 250 megawatts because it will be a big consumption of data that is needed inside. So that means also that we need to look at how we're going to build that in order to also be in alignment with the NEOM objective that need to be 100% green by 2030. So sustainability in NEOM is one of the key things we need to look at that. That's the reason why some of you heard about how we are building. We even don't building spread, we're building vertical. We're going to build only, maybe some of you heard about the line project. We are building only 5% of the length. So when you go in a project like that, everything needs to be different. That's the reason why we work a lot with our ecosystem partner to make it happen. Now, if you go back to the data center, we're looking at the new technology we're going to build that in terms of MEP, in terms of energy, because we need to achieve this goal of being green. Today the market of the data center green is represented about 80% today. In terms of demand, as you ask, we have a strong demand for hyperscale and content provider to come. Why? For 2 reasons. First of all, because they want to sell their capacity to KSA. Just to give you an idea, as of today, if we look at the demand, the growth for GPD, in US, the ratio between 1 billion of a data center built versus GPD is a ratio of 0.6. In the Middle East, about 0.09. In KSA, it's 0.06. So it's very low. Today, only KSA has 67 megawatts, all Saudi. You know how much is going to be by 2030? 1.3 gigawatts. So the growth is tremendous. Why? Because by sovereignty law, the data need to be in the region. It cannot be consumed. We cannot consume Microsoft in US. We cannot consume from Europe. We need to be in the region. That's number one. That's the reason why the capacity is growing. The second reason is because all these companies, also content provider, there was a slide that was presented before where you see, the data center, the hyperscaler, all the other way around, the Netflix, the Apple, the content provider. This is the future. There's no doubt about that. But this company to reduce the latency. To reduce the latency, you need to build your capacity over there, especially in a place where you can have subsea cable connected directly to reduce the latency. So those are the two reasons why hyperscaler and content provider are coming. To sell the services, but also to reduce the latency. In a place that is growing tremendously, it's not to be 1.3 gigawatts by 2030.
That's a lot of incremental capacity. Yeah, that's a lot. I'm going to transition and talk a little bit about a very hot topic, artificial intelligence. Right? Maybe Marcus, I can start with you. You know, have you started to see incremental demand come to your platform from these workloads? And to the extent that you have, maybe I could ask, how have the densities been different? How have architectural differences in terms of how you need to deploy cooling been different? Any color you can share.
Immediate change, my answer is no.
Okay.
But I think this growth on the level, click level specifications requirements for customers already includes some of this. When we saw the average capacity being actually being drawn by the racks that we have designed with more density, more cooling capacity, we don't see them at full occupation yet. So I think part of this is already there, but also we need to consider that there is an enormous amount of data. There is an enormous amount of opportunity there, but we still need to see the maturity of the applications that will torture this data until it's called fast information. And then we'll see, so I think, and this is AI plus the edge applications, is about the ecosystem. It's not just about the hyperscalers providing infrastructure for that. You need to see a combination of use cases, software development, applications, and infrastructure together. And my gut feeling is that the initial phases of this for places and regions like Latin America will be served from outside of that, until these use cases are more established, and then they will be replicated. Because the current stage of AI that we see is still not requiring lower latency. So it's about learning models, and it's about gathering information in a more consolidated way and distributing answers to the end. So it's still immature. I don't see immediate changes. What we are doing, and we have discussions within, we have a center of excellence with 280 engineers dedicated to hyperscale design. We have ongoing conversations with basically all hyperscalers that are deploying capacity in the countries that we operate, and also within Digital Bridge family. And what we see as a big challenge is not trying to define what is the right architecture right now, but how can we build in a sustainable manner with following designs that are going to be future-proof, in terms of how can we add capacity, how can we change specifications over time without demolishing the previous models in place. This is one of the reasons, for example, that we are embracing the modular construction, the modular design in a way that we can work towards surrounding a data hall, that we can replace electrical rooms, HVACs over time without starting a data center from scratch. So, and I think this is one thing. The second thing, that we see a new trend, which is also really important for the industry to bring predictability that allows us to work with supply chain in a more efficient manner, is discussions with customers are not anymore, and this, I would say to you, this is the biggest change I saw in Latin America, which is not just the demand of today, but how to plan the demand of tomorrow in terms of reserved capacity, how to discuss the trends that's going. So you see, we have 150 megawatts roughly contracted capacity, and we have more than 180 reserved capacity within the same customers in the same places. And the discussions between the time that the contracted capacity is deployed and the reserved capacity is expiring, you see years of discussions on how to bring design more up to date to the current requirements. So I would say to you that the AI requirements, specific requirements, something that I see Latin America being affected 2 or 3 years from now. And then the answer is basically more cooling. Better cooling, better efficiency. This is really the answer.
Awesome. Well, Krup, you brought it up at the beginning, so I have to turn it over to you. I would ask you similar question. Are you seeing it? And then I have a follow-up question for you as it relates specifically to Equinix. So
great. appreciate that. And I think that Marcus is probably right about where it might be very geographically focused, but one thing to address your question from earlier, which was about the density and the cooling architecture, is that the densities are super high. You're talking about like 5x what kind of typical hyperscale is today, plus or minus, right? But, so the summary statement is that a standard deviation is higher density than we've seen, and what that also translates to is a different cooling architecture. So it's like it's liquid cooling and kind of other things that are not yet fully. I mean, obviously data centers have liquid cooling in many data centers, including in many Equinix data centers, but it's not ubiquitous. I think that's going to become like a much more common thing in the hyperscale side, which means we have to kind of spend a bunch of time on addressing, and I think that Marcus, you hit the nail on the head, which you have to think about the design of the future, because what the current designs are, they work perfectly well for hyperscale compute, but I don't think that it's going to work, unless you're very flexible, I don't think it'll work exceptionally well for AI compute, which is a different workload. And then the other half of the question is, are we seeing it yet? Again, I think that we're seeing it, we're seeing the green shoots right now, but it seems that a ton of our questions that are coming in from the customers revolve around this. And so, again, that's where the thesis is that, we're probably, if this were a baseball game, I shouldn't use that in Europe, but if this were a baseball game, we're still in the early innings.
All right. Now, follow-up question for you on this. Out of full disclosure, I do cover Equinix, I do cover your stock, so this is something of interest to me. One of the things that I've been thinking about recently is, Equinix was the first mover in terms of developing the carrier-neutral data center, right? Way back in the dawn of the internet, and then from there, I think that helped you garner a considerable market share of these cloud on-ramps, which has been, fruitful for you as we think about digital transformation. As we think about potentially the next wave, which would then be, which could be artificial intelligence, next demand wave, how do you see those deployments fitting into the Equinix ecosystem? And then as part of that, are those developments more likely to live within your retail data center, your traditional data centers, versus xScale, the JV?
That's a really good question. In terms of, so again, coming back to like the genesis of why did Equinix even have an interest in establishing this program in the first place? Again, it's we enjoy a really healthy share of wallet with like the on-ramps, and that's a really valuable component of the core business, and we're very proud of that. The whole thesis was like, how do we create a platform that is a uniform platform where our customers can kind of go from soup to nuts, right? So for our customers' perspective, we don't want to draw a delineation between xScale and retail, because from their lens, they're working with Equinix, right? We're all managed Equinix. And that actually yields a lot of good, fruitful conversations about where they're going, how can we be of service to them, and it's not just a simple mantra that people say, but it's literally painted on the walls of our headquarters, is that the core principle is you keep the customer at the center of everything we do. So from our perspective, it's not necessarily very important whether the future deployments exist within the core business, the retail business, or in xScale. We just want to be of service to be able to provide that full suite of services. The AI side, I think the one question I don't have an answer to, but I think is going to be a very interesting question, is how much does latency matter? Because I appreciate your perspective, Marcos, that latency may not matter, but I don't, based on certain workloads, but AI is not a monolith, right? There's so many different things that can exist within AI, and I think that there's going to be some super latency focused applications that that'll be a component of where the total volume of megawatts of leased capacity is going to go, and that would need to be very closely connected to the Equinix system, as much as that sounds like a commercial for ourselves, but that seems logical.
All right. I want to transition and talk a little bit about pricing and the time we have left. There are a bunch of other topics, but we'll kind of move it along. My question for you, I guess, Marcus, this will be a question for you, is we've seen upward pressure on build costs, at least in the United States amid the inflationary environment. As you think about the bills that you have in progress, how has your cost to build per megawatt changed over the past 24 months? And then as part of that, have you been able to pass the increases in build costs through your customers, let's say to the effect of maintaining your unlimited returns?
Yeah, this is one of the key drivers to make the decision to internalize design and construction management, etc., was to seek more efficiency. Also, changing the design from horizontal to vertical design, it was one of the things that helped us to explore better the locations that we already have, sure, building bigger substations to serve more. So Tamboré campus, for example, and it's important to take one step back and understand that the hyperscale market was not there before pandemic. We had hyperscale customers in Latin America, but we didn't have hyperscale market there because the deployments were small. So the scale was not there. The scale came with the challenges of the pandemic, the constraints in capacity to deliver to their customers. So the immediate response was to be more effective. First was to survive. Second was how to deal with the supply chain challenges during the pandemic. Now, for example, we procured 3 years in advance. We have our own inventory. We announced big global deals with Vertiv and Caterpillar, for example, the previous weeks, where we are buying capacity for 3 years, saving slots in factories so we can keep the production running for Scala so we can support our hyperscales. So it was about driving efficiency and working to keep the same price for hyperscales. What happened is, with the volume they brought to Latin America, especially with the big ones, they tried to bring the same level of pricing they will use it to in the US. In Latin America, it's not the same level of maturity in terms of development. You have another type of obstacles where you don't have big industrial parks ready to go. You need to invest on power grid to bring more power, and etc. So different constraints. But at the first moment, a few of them decided that self-development would be the answer, and that with this, they tried to set the price at the same level as we see, for example, in Virginia or Texas, which is not compatible with the Latin America or emerging markets in general reality. And what happened is that they failed. A lot of the self-developments in the region didn't become a success. They were late, they were over budget, and that drove the prices to where I think it's reasonable when you consider the volume that is being expected, but it's still preserving the characteristics of the region. But it's been a constant. Once we pass the bar of 100 megawatts, 20 megawatts deals, and etc., the pressure on the prices will be a certainty, and we need to drive efficiency towards that. So now we see not only being a provider of space, but also how to help customers to reduce their TCOs, how to be smart about providing power, generating power, making big agreements, big power purchase agreements to serve all the customers at once, how to reduce their TCO by designs that will connect the buildings and reduce the amount of the team, the headcount they need to run their operation. So it's all about efficiency driving prices that will be constantly pressured down as we grow with volume.
All right. So one question for Fabio, and then I'm going to have let's do a rapid round. I have a question for all the panelists. So Fabio, as you think about ZeroPoint DC, right? Can you give us a sense for how you approach building green data centers, just in the context of the Saudi Vision 2030 framework? This has been an important theme for data centers broadly, but would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. Saudi Vision is to be green by 2030 on everything we build and use. So for our case, I think we need to say we are blessed by the nature. We are in a geographical location that's very good. I mean, if you think Saudi Arabia is very hot, actually, in the northwest, we do have season. There is winter, there is summer, we even have snow. Believe it or not, in Trujillo, we go up to 2,500 meters. So we have all the climate we need. Difficult to believe, but this is the case. So having said that, we also we're blessed because we have three kinds of potential natural energy. On the Gulf of Aqaba, we have wind during the night up to 30 knots every single day. And then we have a lot of sun, as you can imagine. But also we are building one of the biggest hydrogen farms in the world with a joint venture with Alpha Power from the US. There's going to be close only less than 3 kilometers from the hyperscale data center. Even when you build hydrogen, you need a lot of space to do solar, because hydrogen won't be solar. So you can be green only if you have those three. You cannot be green just having solar panels, it's not enough. Because what do you do during the night? You cannot be green just having wind or having hydrogen. You need to have all the three of them combined together. That's you can say you are green. So, and actually we even build a company called Enova, is one of the sectors that just focusing on build the the green energy for all the sector in NEOM, not just for the data center, for the mobility, for keep in mind, we are not going to have a car in NEOM. There's no car. We are going to have just mobility through speed train. We're going to have a drone. There is no car. Car just will run on the border. Then when you go outside, there's no car. So if you think about that, the quantity of energy we need is really big. But that's the reason we are building the biggest hydrogen farm and then solar, wind, and solar and wind to make it happen. But another important point, not just to be green, also how you're going to use the energy to reduce. So we talked before about AI. We use AI on two things. First, how we can optimize the data center even on the consumption of the peak. And we go back to the difference between smart city and commodity city. In the commodity city, you predict how much you're going to consume in the next 3 hours. You predict everything with AI. So this one can help you to optimize the cooling in the data center, to understand how much you're going to have as a consumption in the next 3 hours, in the next 2 days. You can have peak. Every data center has a peak. It's not flat. You do have peak. And that's you need to be able to do that. The second thing we use AI is also to build this quantity solution. Even in the way we build, NEOM will be a big construction country. Even when we build, we have an application for quantity lenses going through the satellites to see the percentage of build, how much we need to build, how much supply chain we need in terms of steel, cement, or glass. Because steel, cement, or glass are the big things we need over there. So all this stuff need energy as well. We need to optimize that. So for us, it's a key point. That's the reason why we build a company to do that. And also, as I said before, we work with a lot of ecosystem partners to see how we can embrace new technology. You go to the data center, not that immersive cooling, we're thinking how to put the data center into the water, not in the marine, more in the lake we're building. We are looking at new technology and everything to make sure that we can embrace it. The good things about NEOM, not having a legacy and starting from scratch, we can test everything. It doesn't take ages like in any other city to ask permission. We are our way to look at the things, and we can test every single technology. You look at NEOM as a corridor where you can test the things.
Awesome. I'm seeing that we're out of time, but I have to ask this question to you. When I was here earlier today, I saw we had some young people in the audience, including myself. So my question for you, as we leave on a lighter note, my question for each of you would be, what's one piece of advice that you received over the course of your career that's been incredibly valuable to you and that you would share with the other folks in the audience?
Be passionate. Devote yourself to what you believe. Be passionate. Hire the best people in you. Bring them to a purpose and be passionate. Put all of your energy there. Your heart.
To me, it's have a vision. If you don't have a vision, you don't do anything. Yeah, vision is a dream. You need to fulfill the dream. You need to have a vision. And as you say, you need also to have a passion to fulfill the vision. But vision is important. If you don't have a target, even your team, if you don't give your team a target where you want, but target not just in terms of numbers or revenue, profit, target where you want to be 10 years from now. If you don't have a vision, you don't go anywhere. And the second piece of advice, don't stay in your comfort zone when you grow up. You grew up in London, go in US. You grew up in US, go in the Middle East. You grew up in the Middle East, go in Australia. Don't stay in your comfort zone where you're your friend and family. Move. That's what you do. The third, I finish.
Okay. He's going for it. I love it.
Execute, not just plan. Execute and prove what you do makes sense.
Awesome.
It's tough to go after this because there's a lot of great advice. And by the way, I totally agree with all these. But just to add to it, to have something different, I'll say be curious because always be learning. There's so much. I mean, it's so interesting that our business has so many different components about it. And there's so much to learn, and we have brilliant people in this business, so the opportunity to ask questions, talk to people, you can always be learning, and it makes everything more exciting because there's never a boring day if you learn something new every day.
All right. Well, I can talk actually, of everything we said, it would be have an articulated vision for the future and dedicate your life to executing against it. That's it. I can talk to you guys all day, but we're out of time, so thank you very much. Round of applause.